Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to start. As you know, I'm Irena Hadžiavdić, member of the Central Election Commission of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and I have a great pleasure to actually chair this roundtable number 2, and to be here in the company of our great presenters that will share with us their experience related to the money and politics. Actually, today our focus will be political campaign financing for us who are working in election management bodies or other audit units. It's crucial to know how to do the control, who we actually control. Do we control all of them, or we have some shortcomings in that process? How money is actually spent? What are the sources of funding? Where the public money is going? Do political parties respect the limits that they can spend in campaign? How they report, and what actually the GRECO, the Group of States Against Corruption, as the Council of Europe, a body that actually assess all our elections, say, did we actually manage in last 2 decades to reach some reforms, or we are still, all of us still have a lot of to work. I have representatives of Romania and Lithuania and Albania today with us. And the way how we will do this roundtable is that all our presenters will have 15 minutes for their presentation. So I don't have to present Mr. Constantin Florin Mitulețu-Buica, the President of Permanent Electoral Authority of Romania. He will be our first speaker, so the floor is yours.
Mulțumesc, doamna președintă. Evoluția controlului și a integrității procesului de finanțare a partidelor politice și a campaniilor electorale din România. Finanțarea activității politice a fost reglementată încă din anii 90 pe ambele paliere ale finanțării, publică și privată. Activitatea de finanțare politică a cuprins atât activitatea curentă a partidelor politice, cât și cea derulată cu ocazia campaniilor electorale. Lucrurile au evoluat și s-au schimbat continuu. Dacă inițial controlul și monitorizarea finanțării partidelor politice au fost atribuții alocate Guvernului, Curții de Conturi a României, începând cu anul 2006, de această activitate s-a ocupat Autoritatea Electorală Permanentă. În anul 2006, schimbările au survenit pe fondul unor evaluări și recomandări externe, inclusiv din partea grupului statelor împotriva corupției GRECO, capitole pe care Autoritatea Electorală Permanentă a reușit să le încheie cu succes. Fiecare an a fost o provocare, mai ales pe fondul creșterii atât a numărului partidelor din România, cât și a numărului de competitori electorali participanți în procesele electorale. În 2016, România a introdus o nouă modalitate de finanțare de la bugetul de stat, respectiv cea a campaniilor electorale. Dacă la începutul anului 2016 un număr de 84 de partide erau legal constituite, ca urmare a modificărilor legislative din anul 2016, prin care un partid se putea înființa cu 3 membri, s-a ajuns la 31 decembrie la un număr de 140 de partide politice înființate legal, iar la 31 decembrie 2020 la un număr de 184 de partide politice. Finanțarea publică a crescut consistent în ultimii 7 ani, pe considerentul eliminării legăturii dintre finanțator și partid. Astfel, în prezent, un partid politic poate funcționa și asigura o reprezentare corectă a membrilor de partid și nu mai depinde de interese individuale sau de grup în activitatea politică. Trebuie precizat de asemenea că subvenția publică a crescut de la 6 milioane lei în anul 2015 la 252 de milioane lei în anul 2019. Acest trend ascendent a fost alimentat în ultimii 2 ani de noile provocări în domeniul finanțării partidelor politice și campaniilor electorale determinate de pandemia de COVID-19. O altă schimbare importantă în acest domeniu este reprezentată de creșterea transparenței și integrității privind finanțarea politică. În 2019, Autoritatea Electorală Permanentă a reușit finalizarea implementării proiectului Argus, integritate, etică, transparență, anticorupție în finanțarea partidelor politice și a campaniilor electorale. Proiect finanțat din fonduri europene, care a dus la responsabilizarea ambelor părți implicate în controlul finanțării, angajații ai Autorității Electorale Permanente și reprezentanți ai competitorilor electorali. Odată cu finalizarea proiectului Argus și izbucnirea pandemiei de COVID-19, AEP a ajuns la performanța de a efectua controale asupra activității financiare anuale restante a partidelor politice neefectuate pentru anii anteriori, cât și pentru activitatea de finanțare a campaniilor electorale. În perioada 2006-2018, acțiunile de control desfășurate de Autoritatea Electorală Permanentă au fost efectuate în general la sediile partidelor sau ale competitorilor electorali, însă începând cu anul 2019, acestea au fost efectuate numai la sediile Autorității Electorale Permanente. În anul 2019 s-a reușit efectuarea controlului atât pentru activitatea curentă a tuturor partidelor politice, cât și pentru activitatea de finanțare a celor două campanii electorale, precum și rambursarea la timp a sumelor cheltuite de competitorii electorali potrivit legii. Odată cu această abordare, o nouă schimbare a fost garantarea independenței structurii de control din cadrul Autorității Electorale Permanente, prin neimplicarea conducerii Autorității Electorale Permanente în acțiunile acesteia, cu excepția urmăririi îndeplinirii planului de control și a respectării legislației aplicabile. Cel mai important aspect a fost creșterea transparenței finanțării partidelor politice și a campaniilor electorale prin crearea portalului finanțarepartide.ro, o platformă a autorității care prezintă o soluție bună, care la începutul pandemiei de COVID-19 prezenta imaginea reală din punct de vedere financiar a fiecărui partid politic din România. Aceste elemente noi au fost apreciate de către toți actorii implicați în procesele electorale, respectiv partidele politice și ceilalți competitori electorali, organizațiile neguvernamentale, presa și alte entități implicate în monitorizarea finanțării politice sau controlul finanțării activităților politice. În anul 2020 a venit cu cele mai diverse provocări pentru toate administrațiile electorale, implicit pentru finanțarea partidelor politice și a campaniilor electorale. Dacă în perioada premergătoare pandemiei de COVID-19 toate raportările se făceau în format fizic, acum am trecut la aproape toată activitatea în format digital. Pentru desfășurarea activităților în condiții de siguranță, formațiunile politice au fost înștiințate cu privire la posibilitatea transmiterii tuturor raportărilor obligatorii prin intermediul poștei electronice și semnate electronic. Schimbările au demarat prin instruirea personalului din cadrul partidelor, candidaților și mandatarilor financiari în format videoconferință, instruiri care au dus un plus în ceea ce privește numărul de participanți, cât și cu privire la nivelul de informații puse la dispoziția competitorilor electorali. Aceste acțiuni au fost dublate de activități conexe, precum realizarea de evenimente online cu scopul prezentării modificărilor impuse în contextul pandemic, conferințe de presă pentru prezentarea rezultatelor controalelor efectuate, participări la evenimente online realizate de organizațiile internaționale cu atribuții în domeniul electoral, precum și menținerea legăturii cu organizațiile neguvernamentale și facilitatea accesului la informațiile de interes public. Anul pandemic a făcut ca schimbul de informații dintre autoritatea electorală și competitorii electorali să fie făcut în format electronic, iar începând cu ianuarie 2021, am lansat primul instrument de raportare electronică privind subvențiile de la bugetul de stat, raportări care sunt deja publice privind primele 8 luni ale acestui an. Au mai rămas neinformatizate unele procese din domeniul finanțării partidelor politice și a campaniilor electorale, dar acestea pot fi realizate pe viitor prin schimbarea cadrului legislativ românesc. În concluzie, deși evoluția sistemului de monitorizare și control al partidelor politice și campaniilor electorale din ultimii 2 ani a reprezentat un pas înainte, există potențial pentru îmbunătățiri viitoare. Cu precădere în contextul pandemiei de COVID-19, considerăm că este important să împărtășim bunele practici în domeniul controlului finanțării politice. Astfel, concomitent cu evaluarea continuă a implementării practicilor naționale privind acest domeniu, cooperarea internațională ar putea sprijini definirea unui standard al practicilor în domeniul controlului finanțării partidelor politice și a campaniilor electorale. Mulțumesc, doamna președintă.
Mr. Mitulețu Buica, thank you so much for being so sufficient and efficient during your presentation. And thank you for touching upon two important issues. How COVID-19 changed the campaign that actually, in my country at least, moved to the social networks, which ended in less money spent during the campaign. And actually touching the issue of integrity and the very objective, independent control if we do it. But as you admitted, we still have a lot of challenges ahead of us, not only Romania, but Bosnia and Herzegovina too. Now I will give a floor to Valbona Balgini. I hope that I pronounced your name properly. And she is coming from Albania. She is Director of Internal Audit and Monitoring of Party Finance Unit in the Central Election Commission of Albania. Over to you, Valbona.
Thank you. Dear participants, Honorable Chair of the season. First of all, I would like to thank you to host of this conference for its excellent organization in the condition of the COVID-19 pandemic. Talking about the financing of political parties means addressing the integrity of the electoral process, as well as the credibility of the government that emerged from the respective elections. The issue of the relationship between money and politics has long been the focus of the political, media, and civil society discussions. There is a growing concern among citizens about how political parties and their election campaign are funded. This growing concern is justified. The money that finances political parties, politicians, and their campaigns is more likely to make politicians more accountable to their founders than to their voters. The history not only of Albania, but also that of countries with early consolidated democracies has presented us with many cases when politicians and even political leaders have been in those positions more than representative of the interests of their financial sponsors than voters. In the following, I am introducing to you the Albanian model of financing political parties and their electoral campaigns. What is regulatory framework on political parties in Albania for financing? Perhaps like very few other models in Albanian legislation, the rules for financing politicals are found sections in the Constitution. In its Article 9.3, it's sanctioned the principle that the financial resources of the parties, as well as their expenses, are always made public. Details, rules regarding the financing of political parties, as well as election campaigns, are set out in the law on political parties and the Electoral Code. The CC has the right and obligation to adopt bylaws based on for the implementation of two laws, especially in the Electoral Code. For the first time, the rules for financing political parties were included in the law on political parties in 1991. And this time when the political system has just changed. It is interesting to say that in conditions of the total absence of pluralist elections, and not to mention the financing of campaigns, someone paid attention to establish in the law on parties the rules of their financing. Even at that time, it was for reason that there would be a body that would control the finance of the parties. It will be a parliamentary committee that will do that. With the amendments to the law in 2000, the right to audit the finance of political parties was vested in the Supreme State Audit Office. And in 2001, this responsibility passed to the CC. In 2009, the issue of financing of political parties became part of the Electoral Code for the first time. The most important change in the legal framework regarding the financing of political parties occurred in 2017. The most important change consisted of the CEC competence to monitor the political parties' election campaign, as well as obligation of political parties to report immediately after the elections. In 2019, for the first time, the obligation of financial reporting was imposed on the candidates themselves. With the recent changes of 2020, the current legal framework in Albania regarding financing is completed in terms of who finance the parties and their campaigns, what are the funding limits and prohibitions, and which is the body responsible for controlling, supervising the financing. How is the process carried out? Let's see how finances the parties and their campaigns, who has the right to give them money. According to Albanian legislation, political parties and their candidates can receive funding for the purpose of their election campaign only from local, non-public, natural, and legal persons, from the state budget and from the activity of the party itself. Funding from foreign countries for foreign legal or natural persons, as well as from local public legal entities, is prohibited. What are the funding limits and conditions? Financing from natural or legal persons limits, conditions, and prohibitions. For the purpose of the election campaign, natural legal persons may donate to the election subject, including its candidates, a value not exceeding 1 million Albanian lek, 8,200 euros, or equivalent in goods or service. Provision of funds by a legal entity or any of its stakeholders is prohibited if has benefited from public funds, public contracts, or concessions in the last 3 years worth over 10 million Albanian lek, 82,000 euros. Exercises activities in the field of media, has been a partner with public funds in various projects, and there are monetary obligation if they have monetary obligation to the state budget. Natural legal persons who have made donation may not benefit from public contracts with public-private partnership, or any other way of funds with a total value exceeding 10 million Albanian lek for a period of up to 3 years after the date of election. Financing from the state budget limits, condition, and prohibition. Who received annual funding, under what conditions, to what extent? Every year in the state budget is determined a fund that serves as a public financial assistance for carrying out the annual activity of political parties. The financial assistance provided in the state budget is known in non-election year, as a rule, cannot be less than assistance provided in the previous year. This fund is divided according to the following rules. 70% of the budget is received by the parliamentary parties in accordance with the number of deputies they have. 20% of the budget is equally distributed to parties they have over 10,000 votes, and 10% according to the percentage won among the political parties that have participated in the last parliamentary election and have won over 1% of the votes nationwide. The part that may remain undistributed by the 20% is added to the 17% funded. The distribution is made by decision of the CEEE. The party that has not submitted the annual report does not receive funding from the following years. In case when a political party does not pay the obligation deriving from executive titles or from executable administrative acts, then the relevant amount is withheld from the annual state budget, which is provided for financial assistance of the respective party. Who received funding from the election campaign, under what conditions, and to what extent? For the election campaigns, the party received funds from the state budget as well as from private natural or legal person in the amount and conditions determined by electoral code. From the state budget, receive funds for the campaign, the parties registered as an electoral subject and which have received not less than 1% of the vote in the last elections. The distribution is made in accordance with the number of votes received. The fund distributed to the parties cannot be less than that of the last elections. From the amount that parties participating in the election should receive, when it is the case, the fines of sanction that have been imposed on you are withheld. If the estimated amount is higher than the total election campaign expenses reported by the political parties, or it's assisted as such by the CC according to the independent auditors or its verifications, the political party is obligated to return the difference at the CC. In case the political party does not apply this definition, then is excluded from the right to receive public funds for a period of not less than 5 years, except when it pays the obligation together with fines. Financing of the party itself, limits and conditions. Financing by the political party itself includes membership fees, sales of the newspapers, publication, etc., rental of their properties, income from the sale of their movable and immovable property. Which is the body responsible for controlling, supervising the financing, and how is the process carried out? The body responsible for controlling, supervising the financing of political party is the Central Election Commission. There is a special structure in the CC which carries out this responsibility of the CC. Control and supervision of the annual funding and the election funding. Let's see the annual funding and then election funding. For annual funding, political parties must submit a report to the CC no later than March 31 of the following year. The report contains source of funding based on a format approved by the CC, expenditures based on the format approved by the CC, entities related directly or indirectly to political parties or controlled by them, which are declared by the political party itself. Each political party must record in a special register, according to the format approved by Central Election Commission, the amount of funds received from each natural or legal person, as well as data related to the clear identification of the donor. In any case, the donor at this time of donation must sign a donation declaration according to the format approved by the CC. The list of persons who donate amounts not less than 100,000 Albanian lek, as well as the respective value, must always be made public. Political parties submit the annual financial report together with the audit report performed by independent accounting expert statutory auditors, the same. During the election year, the party's financial report must be submitted along with the election campaign financial report. The CC verifies prima facie whether the report submitted by political parties has been completed in accordance with the belows adopted by the CC. In the verification show that there is a discrepancy that CC returns into the political parties for review. The latter has the obligation to submit the received report within 72 hours. The CC audits the annual financial activity of political party through accounting expert. The CC appoints by lot one or more statutory auditors, accounting experts, to audit the funds received and spent during the calendar year by the political party. The CC, after receiving the audit reports from the statutory auditors, prepares a summary material with the findings of the reports. In case where violation of legal provision regarding the financing of political parties are found, the CC imposes sanctions. All types of financial reports and those of auditors are published. Let's see now the control and monitoring of election campaign funding. Electoral subjects are obligated to submit a financial report for the election campaign to the CC within 16 days from the announcement of the election result. The report, as a rule, should contain information on any donation, loan, or credit given to party and its candidate during the election campaign, 6 months before the campaign, as well as its source, including donations or services in kind. Income for election campaign proposed from all other permitted sources, all items of expenditures for the purpose of the election campaign, and the balance of assets and liability of the political party for the period from the decree of the election date to the election election date. The CSC verifies prima facie whether the report submitted by the electoral subject has been completed in accordance with the bylaw approved by CSC. The CSC audits the financial activity for the election campaigns of electoral subjects through statutory auditors. At the beginning of the election year, the CSC competitively select a list of accounting expert statutory auditors who will audit the funds received and spent by electoral subjects, their candidates, and branch for the election campaign. Statutory auditors draft an audit report according to the format by the CEC and submitted it with 30 days from the moment of entering into the contract with the CEC. The report is published within 48 hours on the official website of the CEC. Also, 6 months before the election date, the CEC appoints a significant number of monitors to monitor the fulfillment of the obligation of the electoral subject regarding the financing of the election campaign. Monitors compile periodic reports every 10 days. In case when violation of legal provisions regarding the financing of political parties during the election campaign are found, the CEC imposes administrative measures with fines according to the legal provision. The decisions of the CEC is always public. And this is what we can do and what we do in Albania. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for your comprehensive presentation, and I couldn't not to compare all this what you said with the rules and legislation in my country. So I think the others did the same, and I was really impressed to hear that there are regulations in constitution related to the finance resources spending, that they always have to be public, and this is unique example of importance of transparency for me, at least. And there are a lot of things that we can definitely pick up from your and Romanian experience. But now we will have a chance to actually hear what Lithuania did. And I have to admit that even prior I become a member of the Central Election Commission, I went to Lithuania to see what they're doing with political campaign finance control. So here with us, we have Lina Petronina. She's the head of political party and political campaign funding control unit of the Central Election Commission of Lithuania. Lina, floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairperson. First of all, I want to express my gratitude for well-organized event, and particularly for choosing the topic, because when I learned about topics, I was very happy. I have been working for 40 years in this field, so it was very interesting for me. I work in Central Electoral Commission of Lithuania. The CEC not only conducts all kinds of election. Oh, sorry. Yeah. It doesn't work. Oh. Okay. The CEC not only conducts all kinds of election referendum, but controls over financing of political campaigns and political parties as well. There is a mixed electoral system in Lithuania, majoritarian and proportional. Not only political parties participate in election, but election committees consisted of voters and the candidates nominated by parties, nominated by committees, or self-nominated too. During last 2 decades, many changes were implemented in regulation of political finances. 20 years ago, the main focus was on publishing quite simple reports, but not so much requirements, limits, and examination of reports. Also, it was the very beginning of state funding for political parties in Lithuania. This special law on financing of political parties and political campaign was adopted in 2004 after a couple of corruption scandals. Trying to ensure equality of participants, there were foreseen more requirements for donations and political advertising, reducing the need for big money and dependence on large donors. Now there are 2 special laws for political parties and financing of political campaigns. This law regulates legal sources of financing and limits of donations, legal expenditure and limits of them, accounting and publicity of financing of political parties and political campaigns, requirement for political advertising, control by the CEC and the other institutions, and the use of information system. I'll concentrate more on financing of political campaigns. The regulation of funding sources had changed several times. Now political campaigns may be funded by donations of national persons, funds received by the political party, including state budget, funding personal funds of candidates, and interest kept in the bank account because the legal entities cannot donate to participants of political campaign. All these funds must be transferred to special account. Depending on election, only citizens of Lithuania or citizens and residents of Lithuania may donate. Every donor may donate 10 average monthly earnings. It's more than 15,000 euro this year for one participant, and no more than 10% of donors declared annual income. Candidates' funds cannot exceed double amount. This means that more than 30,000 euros this year and 20% of declared income and declared funds. The law prescribes the limits of expenditure of political campaign. During all campaign, depending on the election, this year it may be spent 68 euro cents or €1.36 per vote. On slide, you can see concrete amounts for different elections. The limits of expenditure are very important for equal possibilities of all candidates and political parties. Also, gross violations of the law are linked to the limits. If expenditure of campaign or undeclared expenditure or hidden advertising costs exceed 10% of limit, or if expenditure on TV ads exceed half of limit, it is considered as gross violation, and it means that political party which has gross violation can be refused from state funding. Generally, the cost of political advertising reach 85% of all expenditure of political campaign. The law defines some requirements for political advertising, like equal prices and conditions for all participants of campaign, mandatory marking of advertising, silence period, some restriction depending on type of advertising. The CEC uses the information system to gather information from political parties, participants of political campaign, media, monitoring groups, independent auditors. The information system is used almost 20 years. Since 2010, it is mentioned in our law. Earlier, it was just a subject of CEC decision. Now it is used the Fed version of information system. And here you can see the main group of users of our information system and the links to different registers like residents, legal entities, members of political parties, and information system to the state tax inspectorate. The information system helps CEC to control whether the requirements of law are followed, to audit the reports, income and expenditure as well, to evaluate if information presented in reports is accurate and complete. On the other hand, it helps its users, candidates, and political parties to avoid some mistakes and breaches. All donations and expenditure of political campaign must be registered within 10 working days. Media enters information about their prices and conditions before a campaign and information about political advertising within 10 working days after disseminating it. All detailed information on donation, expenditure, political advertising, and submitted reports are published on the website of CEC and the portal voters page. Everybody may search using different filters, export information for their analysis. After election, participants submit all documents, included invoices, contracts. All reports of political campaigns and documents are checked by independent auditors, and their reports on findings are also published. All information about audited participant or political party is available on information system. Auditor also is provided by all documents, contracts, invoices in hard copies. An auditor must carry out independent inspection in compliance with legal acts and according to the terms of reference approved by the CAC, defining the scope of the work. But the decision about breaches of the law is upon CAC. The information system allows the participant to get an information about legality of donation, a right to donate, limits. All donors, if they donate more than 12 euro per participant during political campaign, and all candidates must declare their income and assets to State Tax Inspectorate. Since 2012, when donations from legal entities were forbidden, preventing irregularities, a limit to donate not more than 10% of declared income came into force, and this information isn't public available. So registering a donation in our information system, the treasurer of participant of political campaign receives an information from State Tax Inspectorate if a donor has declared income and assets, if a donation, sum of all donations during calendar year doesn't exceed 10% of declared income. Of course, the treasurer receives information if a person has a right to donate, if he is a citizen of Lithuania or resident in Lithuania. Since 2020, a similar requirement was prescribed to candidates. Their personal funds for political campaign cannot exceed 20% of declared income and declared funds, and the same checks are performed. Besides checking donations, the information system helps participants to control their limits of expenditure and debts, make some control checks before submitting reports, gives an access to information on political advertising entered by media and monitoring groups. Here you can see numbers of our last political campaign of parliament election in 2020. Where there were 332 participants, 22 political parties, and 310 candidates who had separate campaigns. 460 candidates had campaigns common with political party nominated them. The participants entered more than 67,000 of records on bank transfers, donations, invoices, political advertising, contracts. The total income was more than 8 million euro and expenditure more than 9 million euro. Media provided more than 8,000 records on advertising, monitoring groups almost 20,000 of records. The CAC analyzes the information on political advertising, cross-checks in details like article in newspaper, TV or radio ad, paid post in social media, allows to disclose undeclared costs and funding. Of course, the scope of information is huge and the staff of CAC isn't so big, the terms are quite short. So the information system has an analysis tool which groups the information from different sources, participants, media, monitoring groups, and evaluate risk of hidden expenditure. You can see that we have more than 43,000 of records on political advertising, and the system groups and summarize them into more than 4,800 rows and 4 columns, and allows to have a quick look at detailed information. It helps to compare different reports more quickly and evaluate if participants have declared all expenditure on political advertising. Last pandemic year, we had parliamentary election in October. Some changes of law came into force since 1st of January, so we had to modernize our information system. The quarantine and remote work started in the middle of March, and almost 1 month later, 10th of April, the political campaign started. So we started to work at home, and almost all the time of the political campaign, we worked at home, since the registration of participants to audit of reports. There are 2 stages of intensive contacts: registration of participants and submitting reports. All other stages can be performed working at home because we have information system. So the CC has decided the documents of participant registrations may be submitted by email. The biggest challenge was a submitting of documents after election, because we have to receive all invoices of contracts in hard copies. The participants may submit and reports and documents by regular post. By political party submits reports of all candidates nominated by it or personally. All participants were instructed about all means giving a priority to a contactless way. And advanced registration for contact submitting was necessary. It allowed us to regulate flows to avoid of contacts between participants and to organize the work of our employees to reduce their contacts. But supervision is not only the consultations, receiving and publishing reports. We could make checks working at home. Particularly, we were very glad having photos and layouts of the most part of political advertising in our information system. So we discovered another benefit of our information system: simplicity of switching office and remote work. Of course, we got new ideas about developing information system in future. So last 20 years brought a lot of changes in political financing, like first 20 years of human life. Everybody is very happy when a baby is born, no requirements and very huge expectations for the future. The baby is growing, certainly more rules, requirements, some problems, correction of expectation, and finally exams, graduating a school. Finally, young adults may take a responsibility of their own life and even get a right to vote to make decisions on which may affect all country life. Very similar with oversight of political finances. In the beginning, we were very happy to receive reports and publish them. Later, limits and requirements were introduced, irregularities happened, and finally, examination of all reports and documents became the norm and a definite necessity. Parents try to create conditions for comprehensive education of their children. The same is with control. First of all, an education of candidates and political parties, availability of necessary information, which helps to avoid breaches by mistake, and final examination. Only then we can expect good results. And the most important thing, we cannot expect to reach the final point of our journey to create an ideal system. We have to evaluate performance oversight procedures and improve it. Thank you.
Thank you to all presenters for, first of all, being on time. Thank you, Ms. Petronina, for interesting ideas from your legislation, like these limits on TV ads that are interesting for us, I think, and the way how you cooperate with others, like with media, in order to check what political parties present you in their reports. I also like the idea of modernization of IT system, because that's the crucial. If we do not do that, we will not be able to actually share what we have and what our findings in our reports to be correct and to be on time and to be visible, I'm afraid. we finalize our 3 presentation. Now we have half an hour, maybe a little bit less, for questions and answers. And I'm at the moment opening the floor for audience. Please be active. Do we have any volunteers? Yes, Moldova, I think again. We have a very active delegation from Moldova. Thank you very much. And a big delegation.
Yeah, thank you. I have a remark and a question probably about the last presentation of Lina. It was very interesting to listen about the system you use. And in many countries, including mine, the hidden advertising is a problem. And the main challenge in this is who to identify this kind of advertisement, how to evaluate in terms of costs, and how to punish, how to impose the political party to report and to include this in their report. So I want to check if I understood correct. You have a monitoring mechanism, so are they independent, or CEC has a monitoring unit that is dealing with hidden advertisement? And what is the legal base to evaluate the costs and to impose to the political party to report it appropriately? Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Hidden advertising is quite a huge problem. It's really very complicated. And a decision is upon CEC if information is hidden advertising, but not so easy to take this decision. We have quite wide monitoring. We hire a special company for monitoring advertising nationwide. Also, local electoral committees. We monitor political advertising in their region, and we put in the information in our system. And we have some special application on phones for society. We can give us information about all advertising, not necessarily hidden advertising, not necessarily breaches, all advertising, just to know the amount of advertising. And the CEC, we analyze this information, and we can see that it is not market political advertising. We start studying it. We can ask candidate or political party, and we analyze the text of the content of this information, the graphic elements, and then we take a decision. And if it is political advertising, if the decision is that it is political advertising, we count the price according to the prices of other media, because we have a lot of prices of all media. And we can, or if we have no idea, for example, some very small, we can see even reports of other participants in the election previous, and we try to find something very similar to count the price.
Do we have more questions? Anything to add from? But in that case, while you are thinking, let me just say that in my country, the regulatory agency for communication that is dealing with media is sending us all reports, and then we can see some minutes, although we don't have use it for other purposes. And yeah, I hear that the same is in Romania. Your question was also how to impose political party to report. And I would like actually to add that in Bosnia and Herzegovina, we have sanction. I'm not presenter here, but I would like to share, because we adopted our law in 2000 and we established audit department in 2005, or actually 4. So it took us more than 4 years to establish department to do some kind of control. Why I say some kind of control? Because in 2005, the first control was, did they submit the report or not? That was the first to check. So for 2 years, we were so lucky if we got reports. Through our reforms and of course Greco's objections, we made some improvements. So there is a sanction in the Bosnian Herzegovina law. If political party doesn't submit the reports, it will be forbidden to run the next elections. And we have more than 100 of sanctions for avoiding people to run elections. And I think that's very effective, but I also heard from Albania that they have one also very effective, that political parties are not getting public funds if they violate the law, which is, in my opinion, very effective one. So there are ideas for reform and for you to argue for something new when you come home. Thank you. Meantime, more questions? Anything interesting from the audience? Not, then I would like to ask one question to our participants. I have two questions. One is related to your capacities. Are you happy with the audit departments? That's my first question. Thinking about the number of parties that you have to control and how you are sure that you did it. I mean, that was the first question. And the second is actually how it is going with these sanctions. How many political parties, what are the records on sanctions in your country? That part I would like to hear. And do we have actually sanctions? Do you have sanctions proportional to violations or not? Just think about that. Who is volunteer here to speak for?
Mulțumesc. Aș răspunde complet la ambele întrebări. Suntem mulțumiți de structura actuală a compartimentului de control al finanțării partidelor politice, pentru că reușește de 2 ani de zile să realizeze controale la toate entitățile politice participate în procesele electorale sau nu. Avem, așa cum am spus mai devreme, 184 de partide politice, dintre care 8 care primesc subvenții de la bugetul de stat. În anul 2016 s-au înființat mai multe partide ca urmare a acelui cadru legal care prevedea 3 cetățeni români cu drept de vot își pot înființa un partid, dar de această dată suntem deja în timpul controlului în această perioadă în care desfășurăm conferința la cele 184 de partide și, din păcate, am constatat că partidele nou înființate nu au conștientizat că prin înființarea unui partid îți asumi înființarea unei persoane juridice de drept public și că ai niște responsabilități și de la înființare din 2016-17 nu au depus la Autoritatea Electorală Permanentă niciun raport de activitate financiară, niciun document justificativ, nici la organele fiscale potrivit legislației financiar-contabile raportările anuale. Și suntem deja la al 3-lea control 2019, 2020, 2021, în care foarte multe dintre aceste partide nu au raportat situațiile financiare și vom fi nevoiți, din nefericire, să sesizăm organele judiciare, cât și Ministerul Public, pentru că în România are pârghiile doar Ministerul Public de a sesiza Tribunalul Municipiului București în vederea posibilei dizolvări și de radierea partidelor politice care nu se supun rigorilor legii de a raporta aceste situații financiare. Repet, în România Constituția spune cum se organizează partidele politice și cum sunt finanțate prin lege organică, iar legea organică spune că toate partidele înființate legal la Tribunalul Municipiului București au capacitatea juridică de drept public și atunci, ca să spunem așa, înființează o instituție publică, mai bine spus, și trebuie să se supună rigorilor legii și iată că nu o fac, chiar de această dată, repet, suntem nevoiți să sesizăm organele judiciare și de control care au permis înființarea acestor autorități în vederea solicitării desființării. Mulțumesc, doamna președintă.
So we started from one person in financial department in 2004, in the beginning when the law was adopted. Later we had 3 persons and separate units, and now we are 7 people in this unit. So I think it's quite good. And I should say that we have one particularly young working employee, it's our management system. It works 24 hours, 7 days per week, so it really helps us very much. And we have, after election, we have to hire independent auditors which checks all documents, 100% of participants. It's really work. Because earlier, till 2010, we had the state tax inspectorate to check all documents, but it wasn't so effective because of terms and so on. So independent auditors, we can hire several companies. It really helps us. About sanctions. We have several types of sanctions. If we see, as Donna asked me about hidden advertising, if we see that it is hidden advertising or hidden expenditure, the CEC takes a decision to involve them in the report. And when we check if hidden advertising or hidden expenditure doesn't exceed 10% of limit. If it exceeds 10% of limit, it is a gross violation, and we have sanctions for gross violation. So it's very preventive mean for candidates, for political parties, and it's very proportional. Also, we have a system of deposits of election. All candidates should pay a deposit for participating in election during parliamentary election. It's one monthly salary for candidate. And if a candidate doesn't deliver a report and documents, if he has a gross violation, he doesn't receive deposit. So it's more than 1,000 euro. It's quite painful for them. Also, of course, we have administrative sanctions, and the biggest one is state budget. We had, I think, 3 decisions of CEC when political party was recognized gross violation, and political party lost at least half of year state funding. State funding is the most important source of funding in Lithuania. It's more than 80% for political party. So it's really very painful. And to understand our gross violation, one political party during 2016 election to parliament had too much expenditure and decided to divide this expenditure to his candidates. And we had quite long investigation, and we recognized the true expenditure which had political party, which had their candidates, and it was more than 20% upon the limit of political campaign, and political party was refused for €500,000. So it was really painful.
Now, Donna Virginie.
Since we audit with the external auditors, the political parties, this mission is fulfilled by these auditors, external auditors. But we have a little problem in the law of the political parties, because we have the only law it's that we have many political parties registered in Albania, but in reality, more than 50% of them do not function. And we are talking about in terms of annual audit reports. And I thought it's a little problem because if they are not in function, we cannot audit them, and they do not fulfill the obligation to send in the CEC the reports of annual reports. And for the first time this year, the CEC has imposed fines on parties that fail to submit the annual financial reports. And there were 116 political parties that have fines. Yeah. We have now in Albania, there are registered 130 political parties. Then only 20 political parties are active. Yeah. The other part, it's not active, and maybe it doesn't function. Yeah. Thank you.
When we see that political parties do not actively participate in elections, then we have a big issue why they exist at all. And the Central Election Commission sent to the different courts the request for deleting these organizations. And so far we deleted more than 100 political parties, but we still have around 80 that are not active at the moment, although we don't have the proper registry of political parties, and there is no single registry. So that's the problem. How many parties we have in total, we don't know, because they are registered at 16 courts in the country, and that's additional problem for my country. Okay. Is there any more questions? No, I think that you are a little bit tired, but let me then just say a big thank you to all our presenters. We really touch upon different issues like importance of independent audit, transparent information for public. We touch upon hidden donations and problems with hidden donations, but we also were talking about important monitoring and cooperation with other institutions. And at the end, I will just conclude, thanks to my presenter, that modernization of the system definitely help transparency, which is our main actually target. And we would all like to achieve the Greco recommendations. It's a very challenging process. These are maybe the key points that I pick up from our presenters. I'm very thankful to all of them, and I think that they deserve a big applause before I say it's the end of this roundtable. Thank you so much for your patience.